Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into the movie Behind Enemy Lines. It's an exciting story about a naval flight officer named Lieutenant Chris Burnett. When Chris gets sent to war, something dreadful happens that changes his life altogether. Let's break it down step by step. The movie starts during the Bosnian War, and at this point, the war is almost over. NATO forces are also pulling back. Then, we're introduced to an American aircraft carrier called the USS Carl Vinson. On the deck, an F-18 Super Hornet fighter jet is being prepared for takeoff. There's a lot of activity as people give instructions, and inside the plane, we see two pilots, Lieutenant Chris Burnett and Lieutenant Jeremy Stackhouse. But suddenly, they're told they can't take off today. This isn't the first time it's happened, it's actually the second time. Both pilots are frustrated, and they step out of the plane. Chris is clearly more upset. He's angry because most of his missions lately have just been non-combat missions. This isn't what he signed up for when he joined the Navy. As they walk away, they notice some soldiers playing a game nearby. To blow off some steam, they decide to join in. One of the soldiers tweaks the rules to make the game more fun, using some high-tech gear. But the game doesn't finish because the ball gets launched into the water. Just then a Blackhawk arrives. Out steps a NATO commander named Juan Miguel Piquet. He meets with Admiral Leslie Reigart, who's in charge of the USS Carl Vinson. Juan shows Leslie some documents and explains that there have been reports of their pilots flying too much and crossing boundaries they shouldn't. He says this is unacceptable, and if it keeps happening, there will be serious consequences. Juan wants Leslie to make sure everyone follows the rules and remembers their responsibilities. Admiral Leslie is clearly angry about the situation, but he knows he has no choice but to abide by the orders. Next, we see Chris and his co-pilot Jeremy sitting in the cafeteria, having a meal. While they're eating, a Marine captain named Clean Roadway walks up to them. He tells them that another war might be starting soon, and they could be given a mission at any moment. The captain warns them to get ready, both mentally and physically, because he doesn't think they're fully prepared for combat yet. Chris, however, insists that he's ready. To prove his point, the captain gestures toward a group of soldiers nearby who are competing in a push-up challenge. It's clear the captain wants Chris to understand the level of fitness and discipline required for what's coming. Just then, another soldier approaches Chris and tells him to come with him. Chris keeps asking why he's being called by Admiral Leslie, but the soldier says he doesn't know. He was just told to bring Chris to the Admiral Leslie. Chris follows him, still confused. When Chris meets the Admiral Leslie, he asks Chris if he's submitted his resignation letter. Chris says yes, he has. The Admiral then asks Chris why he wants to leave. Chris explains that he joined the Navy with big dreams. He wanted to fly fighter planes and go to war. But after arriving, he was given the job of a watchman. He's frustrated with the boring, repetitive routine and feels like he's losing his skills as a fighter pilot. He's worried that if this continues, he might even forget all the training he worked so hard for. Leslie listens carefully but seems disappointed by Chris's decision. He tells Chris that he'll respond to his resignation in 2 weeks. Chris gets emotional and tears up, but he doesn't argue. He quietly leaves the room, clearly feeling conflicted about his future. After Chris leaves the Admiral Leslie's office, he meets Jeremy outside. Jeremy is clearly upset and asks Chris if it's true that he's resigned. Chris confirms it, and Jeremy becomes even more distressed. The two share a moment of frustration, knowing their partnership might be coming to an end. Chris then calls his father to wish him Merry Christmas. As he's talking, he notices all the Christmas decorations and preparations around him, but his mood quickly sours when he sees his name on a mission board. The mission isn't what he hoped for. It's a non-flying assignment, where he's supposed to take photographs. This news ruins his Christmas spirit completely. Chris complains to Jeremy about the situation. Jeremy tries to cheer him up, saying they might still get another chance to fly. Soon after, they board their F-18 Super Hornet fighter jet and take off. But even as they're in the air, Chris still looks troubled. While flying, Chris notices something unusual on the radar. He points it out to Jeremy, who tells him it's a restricted area and they should stay away, but Chris is curious and can't resist checking it out. He turns on the jet's advanced cameras to record the area. What they see is shocking, a large group of Serbian militia soldiers on the ground. The militia also notices the jet and realizes they're being recorded and photographed. The leader of the Serbian militia immediately orders a missile launch, targeting the F-18. Chris and Jeremy quickly contact their headquarters for help, but before they can get any support, the militia fires another missile. The missile chases the jet, and the pilots do everything they can to escape. They even drop fuel tanks to try and distract the missile. But despite their efforts, one missile hits the jet, causing it to crash. Both pilots eject from the jet and land in a remote jungle. They're injured but alive. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Admiral Leslie is informed about the crash. Admiral Leslie immediately orders a rescue mission. In the jungle, Chris tries to use a radio to contact their headquarters for help. Jeremy, who's more seriously injured, tells Chris to go to higher ground to get a better signal. He says he'll stay behind while Chris goes ahead. Chris is reluctant to leave Jeremy, but he knows it's their best chance. So he agrees and sets off alone, hoping to establish wireless communication with the headquarters. After the jet crashes, the Serbian militia gang's commander sees the wreckage and orders his men to destroy all parts of the plane. They don't want any evidence left behind that could be recovered. Meanwhile, in the jungle, Jeremy is lying on the ground, badly injured. Suddenly, a tank rolls up, and the gang surrounds him. Their commander starts interrogating Jeremy, demanding answers. Chris, hiding nearby, watches everything through binoculars. He's helpless and can't do anything to save Jeremy. After the interrogation, the commander walks away, and one of the gang members coldly shoots Jeremy in the head, killing him. Chris screams in horror, unable to control his emotions. But this scream gives away his location, and the gang starts chasing him. Chris runs for his life and manages to reach higher ground. From there, he uses his radio to contact the control room. He informs them about Jeremy's death and his own desperate situation. Admiral Leslie, who's coordinating the rescue, gives Chris new coordinates for a pickup point. Chris starts making his way there, hoping to survive. However, NATO forces advise Admiral Leslie not to send a rescue team. They're worried it could escalate tensions in the region and make things worse. Admiral Leslie is in a tough spot. He has no choice but to change the location of the rescue mission. The new location needs to be outside Serbian territory to avoid escalating tensions. However, this makes things much harder for Chris, as reaching the new location will be extremely difficult for him. Meanwhile, Chris is on the run. The Serbian militia is chasing him relentlessly, determined to catch him. But Chris is just as determined to survive. He keeps running, trying to reach the coordinates Admiral Leslie gave him. What Chris doesn't know is that no rescue mission will be coming to that location anymore. Back at headquarters, they're tracking Chris's location using satellite technology. When Chris finally reaches the original coordinates, he contacts headquarters, only to be told he needs to move to a new location. This frustrates Chris because the new location is far away and actually takes him back toward the area where his plane crashed. Chris argues with headquarters, saying he's ready to be rescued from where he is. But Admiral Leslie has no other options. He scolds Chris, reminding him that he's a naval combat aviator and needs to use his training in evasion and survival to reach the new location. Just as Chris is processing this, he realizes his pursuers are closing in on him. He starts running again, pushing himself to the limit. Exhausted and desperate, Chris reaches a mass grave site. He knows he can't outrun the Serbian militia anymore, so he makes a quick decision. He hides himself in the mass grave, staying as quiet and still as possible. The Serbian militia passes by the grave, not noticing Chris hiding there. Once they're gone, Chris cautiously comes out of hiding and starts moving toward the new location, hoping to finally find safety. Eventually, Chris reaches a village and convinces some locals to give him a ride. But the Serbian militia spots him again and attacks the village. Chaos breaks out, and the locals, thinking Chris is there to plant bombs, capture him. Chris tries to explain that he's just a photographer and means no harm. Before things can calm down, the Serbian militia arrives, and a fierce battle erupts between them and the locals. In the confusion, Chris manages to escape and continues his journey. He eventually makes it back to the crash site. At the crash site, Chris activates the plane's GPS and retrieves the hard drive containing the photographs he took earlier. But just as he gets the hard drive, the militia shows up again. A final confrontation takes place, and it looks like Chris might not make it out alive. Thankfully, American forces arrive just in time and rescue Chris. He's brought back to safety, where he hands over the hard drive to Admiral Leslie, and Admiral Leslie returns his resignation letter, effectively canceling his resignation. As for Admiral Leslie, he retires from his position for violating the rules during the rescue mission. The film ends with Chris finally returning home, surviving the jet crash and the dreadful survival test. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.